Guess what? There is a new movie coming out on Netflix called Marines. Literally, the movie's called Marines. It's pretty highly anticipated, and guess what? It's releasing on the Marine Corps birthday on November 10th of 2025. So it's supposed to be actually part of a 4-part docuseries, and it's titled Marines, it's aptly named Marines. Now, this isn't a scripted drama piece. This is actually like an unfiltered documentary, essentially, is how it's being described. Apparently, it's going to be pulling back the curtain on the U.S. Marine Corps, and whoever filmed it was given unfettered, unprecedented access, granted by the Marine Corps specifically, to follow the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit as they were patrolling the Pacific Theater. So it's going to be like a no joke, hey, we've got a documentary team following a Marine Expeditionary Unit across the Pacific and watching their training, documenting what they were doing while they were out there. And the trailer for this thing looks freaking unbelievable. So I'm going to definitely watch it 100% when it comes out. Like I said, it was timed perfectly to coincide with the Marine Corps' 250th birthday, which is on November 10th of 2025 of this year, which is a huge deal because the next time something like that happens, none of us are going to be alive anymore. So this is going to be a huge, huge occasion. Now, apparently they filmed all kinds of stuff from intense combat drills, personal reflections, personal interviews with a bunch of different Marines in the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, and then also just like documenting the relentless grind of what a deployment looks like while you're in a MEU, on a 31st, on any MEU, on like how difficult it is, how much they're working. Apparently the people that filmed it are promising to try to humanize Marines, not just as symbols of lethal precision, but also as sons, daughters, fathers, mothers, navigating how brutal it is to be an active duty forward deployed Marine in a Marine Expeditionary Unit and the sacrifices that they have to make in order to be there. Now, the 31st MEU is comprised of over 2,200 Marines and sailors aboard ships like the USS America, the USS New Orleans, and others. And essentially what a MEU is, what a Marine Expeditionary Unit is essentially a crisis response team that's comprised of more than 2,000 people, respond and react to any global threat or situation anywhere around the world when they're forward deployed. And this includes like combat situations or humanitarian missions as well. So like, for example, if they were in the Caribbean or they were in the Atlantic or near the Atlantic or Caribbean, they could respond to Haiti. If they were in the Pacific and something happened in Malaysia, like an earthquake or a massive volcano, they could respond to that. They could respond to things in Australia. They could respond to things in the Philippines, anything like that. Essentially what these folks did is they chronicled and documented this 7-month Marine Expeditionary Unit deployment, showing their dusk to dawn amphibious assaults with rubber Zodiac boats, with live fire exercises, tropical rainforests, simulations of urban warfare and chemical attacks, mass casualty evacuation scenarios and simulations, and just all kinds of things that are testing their ability to react to situations. The way they described this film is, quote, a visceral coming-of-age tale for recruits in their late teens and early 20s, thrust from civilian comforts into a pressure cooker of salt water, sweat, and steel. They're documenting these folks from all over the planet. So the folks that they interview, the folks they talk to are from all over the place, from like rural farmland to, urban centers like Chicago and New York City and stuff like that. They're going to be talking about like some of the unbreakable bonds that these folks formed, late night interviews, documenting like personal confessions about like their home lives, their, lost loves, family strains, things like that. Now, the person that directed this whole series is named Chelsea Yarnell, who's worked on some previous things like Netflix's Cheer and America's Sweethearts, Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. Essentially, there's a bunch of big production studios that were involved in this thing, apparently. So it's like a big collaboration between Amblin Documentaries, which is Steven Spielberg's baby, helping and working with Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, and Masters of the Air. In addition to that, they've also got Lucky 8 TV, which is an Emmy-winning outfit behind a bunch of things like Unlocked, A Jail Experiment, and A&E 60 Days In. But yeah, this is basically going to be granting these folks like a rare, unfettered access to shadow Marine Expeditionary Unit through Okinawa, through at-sea replenishments, through island training, any type of like scenarios that could be happening out there at sea. The presidents of Amblin have said that this is going to be a, quote, gripping, important look behind the curtain of one of our nation's most vital institutions, end quote. Currently, there was a lot of adversity that they faced during this. I mean, they were in hurricane season during the time when they filmed this. They were going through a bunch of restricted zones. They had a bunch of ethical tightropes they had to walk for this thing. But they ended up collecting over 500 hours of footage that they had to compress down into these, 45 to 60-minute episodes, which they haven't 100% disclosed the times for just yet. But the official trailer just dropped recently, only days ago, on Netflix's YouTube channel. And it's just about 2 minutes long, like showcasing what the Marine Expeditionary Unit experienced while on that deployment. So either way, this thing is going to be freaking cool, and I'm looking forward to it. It's coming out, like I said, on November 10th of 2025, like right on the Marine Corps birthday, literally on the 250th birthday of the Marine Corps. So it's going to be perfect for Veterans Day weekend and the Marine Corps birthday. And if this is something that you're interested in, I would recommend checking it out. So I know I will be. So it looks like there may possibly be another meeting being set up between President Trump and President Vladimir Putin of Russia. Now, a lot of people are interpreting this move as a way to potentially, delay U.S. military aid to Ukraine, because Russian President Vladimir Putin reportedly initiated a surprise phone call with U.S. President Donald Trump on October 16th of 2025, which led to an announcement of another in-person summit in Budapest, Hungary. Now, this is a development that's kind of happened just one day before the president's scheduled White House meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky on October 17th of 2025, where the primary agenda that they were going to be talking about was Ukraine's request for advanced U.S. Tomahawk cruise missiles, which is a long-range weapon capable of striking deep into Russian territory. Now, a lot of analysts are viewing the timing and the content of the call as Putin's strategy to exploit Trump's eagerness for a quick diplomatic win on Ukraine, thereby delaying or possibly derailing the missile transfers that could shift the battlefield dynamics in favor of Kyiv. Now, since assuming office for his second presidency in January, President Trump has kind of had a different approach to Ukraine and Russia because he was very frustrated with the conflict's prolongation, calling it a, quote, inglorious drain on U.S. resources, and vowed for it to end in 24 hours after he took the presidency. Obviously, it's taken a little bit more time, and there's been a lot more. It's been a very complicated process, so it has not necessarily ended yet, and tensions have remained pretty high. However, after brokering the ceasefire in Gaza between Israel and Hamas, I think the president seems confident, or at least I would imagine that's provided him with a little bit more confidence to move forward with trying to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine. So since the last meeting between President Putin and President Trump, Moscow has continued with their pattern of aggression against Ukraine, and Ukraine has continued their pattern of aggression towards Russia, because there hasn't really seemed to be a lot of movement as far as towards peace in the region, because both sides kept attacking each other and have been escalating their attacks on logistical supply chains, on energy infrastructure, and things of that nature between the two parties. The two leaders have had 8 known phone calls since January, several of which had led to President Trump softening his criticisms on Russia. But like I said, the specific flashpoint that's probably leading to this is Ukraine's push for Tomahawk cruise missiles developed in the 1970s by the U.S. Navy. Because these weapons have a long range of between 1,000 and 1,500 miles. They fly at supersonic speeds at low altitudes to evade detection, and they can use precision-guided systems, including inertial navigation, GPS, terrain contour matching, and digital scheme matching area correlator. They're capable of carrying conventional or nuclear warheads and are typically launched from subs or ships, though a ground launch variant is under development but not yet operational even for U.S. forces. But for Ukraine, this would be a huge game changer, because they'd be able to launch these high-value strikes on Russian targets like the Shahed drone production facility in Yelabuga or the Engels 2 air base in Saratov Oblast, which is currently out of reach for Ukraine based on what they have available for them. So they're currently kind of limited based on U.S. restrictions on long-range strikes into Russia. And Zelensky emphasized that missiles would only target military objectives and said that they would never attack civilians. Now, prior to the call, President Trump had signaled openness to transferring cruise missiles to Ukraine to assist them in their, defense against Russia. Specifically on October 13th of 2025, while en route to Israel aboard Air Force One, President Trump told reporters, quote, "If the war is not settled, we could send Tomahawks to Ukraine," end quote, which kind of adds extra warning to Russia, Then he also said, quote, "Do they want Tomahawks going in the right direction? I don't think so," end quote. Now, this statement triggered some concerns for the Kremlin, obviously, with spokesman Dmitry Peskov acknowledging it to Russian media. So far, Zelensky has tried to seize the momentum in that direction, vowing in a national address that the mere threat was pressuring Moscow into dialogue, saying, quote, "Russia fears the missiles and this pressure may work for peace," end quote. Now, U.S. officials have often floated the idea of cruise missiles being imported as leverage to potentially coax Russia into peace talks, but it so far has not happened, obviously. So in this most recent call between President Trump and President Putin, which lasted over 2.5 hours and was initiated by President Putin on October 16th, and again, this is the 8th time that they've had discussions directly since Trump's inauguration. Trump described it as, quote, "very productive," and announced great progress on Truth Social, focusing on steps to end the war in Ukraine. The Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov also confirmed the discussion covered the Ukraine conflict, bilateral trade, and potential post-war economic ties, though President Trump specified formal trade talks would have to wait until an actual formal peace resolution. Now, President Putin explicitly urged President Trump that it, quote, "won't change the situation on the battlefield, but would cause substantial damage to the relationship between our countries." And then the president later recounted the exchange lightheartedly to reporters in the Oval Office, saying, quote, "I did actually say, would you mind if I gave a couple of thousand Tomahawks to your opposition?" End quote. And then President Trump did say, "I did say that to him. I said it just that way. He didn't like the idea. You have to be a little bit lighthearted sometimes," end quote. Now, directly from this call, there's been potentially another in-person summit that they might be discussing having in Budapest, Hungary, tentatively within 2 weeks, potentially, which would be like potentially by late October, early November of 2025. Now, Hungary, which is a close ally of the United States under Prime Minister Viktor Orban, has declared intentions to exit the International Criminal Court, which issued an arrest warrant for Putin in March back in 2023 over the alleged war crimes in Ukraine. And as an ICC signatory, Hungary is technically obligated to arrest Putin upon entry, but Viktor Orban dismissed that, stating, quote, "it would not happen." Then this would make Budapest one of the few places in the EU that's a safe location for Putin to land, which would be his first visit to Hungary since the 2022 invasion. Now, Viktor Orban also confirmed on X, quote, "preparations for the USA-Russia peace summit are underway," end quote, and described Hungary as a island of peace. Now, obviously, there's a lot of logistical hurdles that are going to still remain in this thing because there's EU sanctions and airspace restrictions that would complicate Putin's travel to the region. But Hungary's foreign minister has come out recently saying, quote, "there is no need for any kind of consultation with anyone. We will receive Putin with respect, host him, and provide the conditions for him to negotiate with the American president," end quote. Now, before the summit would happen, senior U.S. and Russian envoys, including the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, would meet next week at an undisclosed location to lay the groundwork for this meeting. And while some of the meetings prior and conversations prior have been somewhat fruitless or seemed like they haven't really had much of an impact, President Trump seems to feel optimistic for some breakthroughs and also floated the idea of possible indirect talks between Zelensky and President Putin as well, saying, quote, "they don't get along too well, those two, so we may do something where we're separate but equal." Now, some people view this as Putin's calculated bid to buy some time to neutralize the Tomahawk threat without concessions. And President Trump's kind of gone back and forth with the idea of sending them Tomahawks. Now, the Institute for the Study of War have emphasized that Tomahawks could inflict substantial damage on Russian logistics, but the diplomatic pivot would obviously cause a lot of friction between the relationship between Russia and the United States. And right now, there's a lot of people, specifically like the U.S. Vice President said on Newsmax recently, quote, "the Russians and the Ukrainians are just not at the point where they can make a deal. It remains possible, but it will require a lot more work." Now, the administration currently feels that the path to ceasefire is possible, and they remain pretty optimistic about it. But at the same time, there's a lot of reservations because They've been trying to do this for months and months at this point, and nothing has really come from it just yet. Right now, Putin still seems like he's not willing to really compromise and maintains that they have significant demands upon Kyiv in order to stop the conflict. And they probably view this as buying some more time for Russian battlefield gains in Donetsk, while Ukraine has not really publicly commented on this, but is definitely expected to press President Trump vigorously on October 17th when they're supposed to meet. Now, whether or not the United States is actually going to send Ukraine Tomahawk cruise missiles or not, I think largely would rely on the outcome of these talks in Hungary and whether or not there's any genuine progress that comes out of it, or if it's just merely as a means to delay this stalemate so far. But we'll see what ends up happening with it. I want to stay optimistic because I think we can all agree at this point that having an open war in Europe is not really helping anyone. It's propping up the economy of Russia right now. But if they can end it somehow, then I think that there will be more prosperity in the region, not only for Ukraine, but for the Russian people as well. And also for more peace and security and stability in Europe. So hopefully something good will come of this, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. All right, guys, that's it for the daily roll-up for today. I appreciate you watching the video until now. Believe it or not, it does actually help support the channel if you watch the video all the way through, because it helps promote it in YouTube, and YouTube promotes it in the algorithm if people are retained and watch the video from beginning to end. So thank you so much for watching. Another way you can support the channel is you can like this video, you can leave a comment in the comment sections below, or you can share this video with your friends. So please let us know what you thought about this video in the comment section below, and we'll see you in the next video.